we're live on YouTube. Let me click over to Instagram real quick. There we go. It's picking up. Go live on Instagram. All right, that looks good. All right, welcome aboard, everyone, for another, I guess this is a podcast now, another podcast with John Key. John, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and what you do. Go ahead.
John Key. It's tricky. It's a double name. So my last name's Powell. John Key or John, depending on who you are. But I manage ponds in South Carolina. I started my pond management career, I guess, at Southland Fisheries. I was their sales manager, and I was with them for about 6 years before I split off and started doing my own thing. And I guess the main reason was, Southland Fisheries. If you don't know Southland Fisheries, if you're in the Georgia, South Carolina, or North Carolina area, and you've ever seen the fish truck at the feed and seed stores, chances are that was Southland Fisheries.
Yeah.
And their bread and butter is growing and selling fish. But what they didn't and don't do is the pond management side of things. So we'd get a lot of calls and of people, they want fish, but they want other stuff done. And I just saw the need that a lot of people needed help, and we couldn't really facilitate that need. So I started my own company. We're about 2 years old now. I guess I've been managing ponds for since 2017, beginning of 2017.
Right on.
So yeah, I cover the South Carolina area. I'm out of Columbia, but I've got clients all over the place in South Carolina. I tried to stick to South Carolina. I've got buddies. If you need help in Georgia or North Carolina, I've got buddies there that I like to refer people to, and I just stick to the South Carolina area.
Yeah, being tied in with a fish hatchery would be a tremendous advantage, especially an established one like Southland. Actually, if you guys remember, we weren't happy with the with the shellcracker density on the original stocking at Sugar Hill, and Southland is where I got the shellcracker. I couldn't find Reddier anywhere that year.
Yeah, I saw that. I was just paging through Instagram or something, and I saw that. And I was like, oh, that's my truck.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a cool operation, the fish truck thing.
I enjoyed stocking fish. I did it part-time, I went the other way. I started a pond management business because I worked for HOAs as a lifeguard. And I just so happened to get a degree and understand pond management real well, and then to be able to walk right into just signing HOA contracts right out of college. So I didn't go about it that way. Now, my friend Brian Simmons over at Owen and Williams Fish Farm.
I know Brian.
Yeah, Brian's a good dude.
I know Brian real well.
Yeah, Brian's I really couldn't give Brian enough praise over the years. He was just a little bit older than me and went to Georgia. That's where I first met him, and then started doing business with him and Paul years and years in the 90s, and I would say that Brian is definitely top 3 best fishery scientist I've ever been around personally.
Yeah.
When you talk about somebody like him who's been working at a fish hatchery since he was 15 and then got a degree in the only to go back and then become basically the owner now. He pretty much owns it.
It's his now.
Yeah. Once Paul passed, it went to Brian, and now his boy's working there. Yeah. It's a really cool family business. And like I said, I've learned more from Paul Williams and Brian Simmons down at Owen Williams than any two people. They were very generous with the information they gave to me. You just can't say enough good things about those guys. But that being said, do you do primarily like how is your workload split? I mean, you do have enough fisheries management that you can do that full time, or you've got some dredging, or what are you doing full time?
Well, first, I do want to I want to piggyback off the Brian, Owen, and Williams. I would part of Southland when you're on the fish truck and you got to service all of Georgia. You can't be running all the way from Columbia back and forth. So we had kind of a home base there at Owen and Williams, and Owen and Williams, if you've ever been to that facility, one of the cleanest fish farms I've ever been to. And a lot of what I know about fisheries management is from Brian.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a lot of long good he's if you're in the Georgia area, they're down in Hawkinsville. It's a good place to get fish. But anyway, so yeah, I started off as just fisheries management.
Mm-hmm.
So stocking fish, and then all the things that go into managing, aeration and fish feeders. And it's kind of evolved. I do work with, stormwater management.
Mm-hmm.
I don't per se do dredging, but if there's a situation where we can drain the pond, absolutely we can do dredging. We can get equipment in there, get the muck out that way. I don't have full water dredging equipment, but
Mm-hmm.
I work with people that do. So really, we kind of do everything.
Mm-hmm.
If there's something that I physically can't do with my business, I work with people very closely that do that work. So yeah, it started off mainly, pond stocking and all the things that go into growing fish. But with HOAs, we'll do erosion control and aquatic, like beneficial aquatic planting.
Sure.
Aquatic weed or plant planting.
Aquatic weed control, I'm sure.
Plenty of aquatic weed control. I guess that's, probably takes up half of my time is the weed control.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to touch on. That I don't mean to cut you off, but I just wanted to touch on that because I concentrate on the fisheries management part of it so much. And one of the things I don't want to do is make this a source of information that would cut out professionals. I don't like giving away all of it, and I don't feel like that there's such probably just low amount of knowledge and awareness around fisheries management that I don't think I'm hurting anybody there, but I'm also not giving away like all the weed control stuff. They need to pay for that. We have to make a living somehow. Right. And I just want the kids that are following, a lot of kids on here, and I just want them to understand that what I present here as a fisheries manager is part of the job, but it's not the whole thing. You're not going to have your whole day won't be taken up just managing fisheries. You're going to be doing dredge. You're going to be doing wetland delineation. You're going to be doing weed control stuff, if you work in this industry.
Yeah. That actually kind of makes me think of those, I used to hop on Facebook in these pond management groups, and I'd sit there and I'd type up, try and help people with their questions. And then I think, and I've seen posts that you've posted, and you've stayed away from those groups. At least that's what it seems. But you get all kinds of people will go on your channel and they'll read a post that you did, and then they'll hop in those groups, and now they're the expert.
Yes.
So it gets super muddied up.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, but
Yes,
no, you've only been helpful. As a matter of fact, when I get a new client, a lot of times either they're like, "Hey, you follow this guy?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah." And if they haven't heard of you, then I'll send them to your page, or Pond Boss, because I don't, I want to be who they call on, I guess, when they need help with their pond, but I'm not the only source of information, and I want them to be well informed. There are secrets to the trade that I don't necessarily just broadcast readily. I've spent
sure.
thousands of hours learning this stuff, and to just hand it over. But that being said, there's a physical aspect to it too. Not everybody can hop on an excavator and do that kind of work, or there's people that just would like, I can mow my yard, but I'd rather have someone else mow our yard so I have time to do other things. So part of it is secrets of the trade, quote unquote, but a lot of it it's just another service, like a yard service. And the fisheries management part, it does, you can learn a lot on your channel, but like the other day, it was a couple months ago, I shocked the pond in North Carolina, and I get there, the pond was stocked a couple years before. I hadn't necessarily touched. I put some bass in it a while back, but other than that, have not been in contact with the people, management, or anything. Just stocked the pond with bass. So I get there, the pond is super greened up. Phytoplankton, the phytoplankton bloom. You could stick a cup in it and look, and you see all the little phytoplankton balls.
Sure.
We shocked the pond. The bass were, I think the relative weight on those bass was like 70% or something.
Yeah, not
Nothing
good.
above 70%. And I think I only shocked up maybe 15 to 20 of them.
Okay.
And when the feeder goes off, you see it piranhas, and then the water's so green. And so, you would think, check the box. It's got a phytoplankton bloom. The feeder's going. The fish are going crazy. Why aren't the bass big? I did an algae test, and when we determined the algae is called Volvox. Anyway, it's a colonizing type of phytoplankton, and it was too big for zooplankton to graze on. So in that particular pond, the bluegill isn't going to be necessarily your answer for growing bass, because there was no only bluegill were 7-8 inches and above. There's you saw some like real tiny stuff, nothing in between.
Right.
So there's no food for the little fish when they hatch out. So when you get in that situation, there's no, you have to just work off a lot of knowledge that you have from just doing it so long. And I don't know if this is the perfect track, but we decided maybe threadfin shad would be a good option, because
reading my mind, my friend. Keep going.
They can use phytoplankton. They'll filter that. They'll be able to thrive in that pond, and then your bass are going to have something to eat.
Right.
And then
I would also think that they're going to be filter feeding that plankton, which is going to be reducing that density, which then is going to give a chance for other forms of plankton to kind of come and become involved in that. And you're transferring that phytoplankton density directly to a perfect forage fish for, it sounds like, the size fish that you needed. So I agree 100%. Yep.
And that, that's some, and another pond management company actually, and they're not a fishery, they're more weed and algae. But they brought me in to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where, those situations, anybody can read, stock 1,000 bluegill per acre, or 1,500 bluegill per acre, and this many bass. But I guess that's where that expertise comes in, is those scenarios. Because
Oh, exactly. I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's just like book knowledge. You know what? I'm adding to the book knowledge that I had, but
yeah,
when I put it into text like this, it's just elaborate book knowledge.
right,
So we can't cover every single situation that you're going to come across when in this arena.
yeah,
And like you said, these guys, they'll come on and they'll read a post, and then they'll go into the other groups, and then they act like it's their information. I actually don't have a problem with that. Probably when I was a younger man, I would have, but I don't have a problem with that anymore, because at least they're in the ballpark of the right information.
yeah,
Those Facebook chat groups are just an echo chamber of nonsense. And that's why I don't participate in them. If you're going to come and talk to me, come to my monetized site, type it on here so I get some money. I'm not going there
yeah.
and participating. And it doesn't work. I've already done it before. I did it many years ago when Facebook first became Facebook. I made an attempt at this, and it did not work. But again, I didn't have the right frame of mind. I didn't understand how many people were going to be hateful, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
I wasn't mentally tough enough to do this back then, you know. So this time around, when I decided to try again, I came a little bit more prepared.
Yeah, well, so far so good, man. I there was a need for what you're doing, so I'm glad you're doing it.
I appreciate that. I really do.
And yeah,
I
been
was
helping.
going to elaborate on that. Some other fisheries related work that you have. I noticed you guys look like you're doing some electrofishing in the pictures that you sent me.
Yeah.
What are some of the? Do you have any trophy bass situations going right now?
I do. So I have a few. Most of them are in kind of the beginning, year or two stage,
Mm-hmm.
which those are exciting too. I don't have any ones that I've been managing for, 7 years and they're 10 pounds. But I do have a lot of them that are in the second year and they're, 6 pounds.
Right.
And there was a buddy of mine. I wanted to do a little experiment. So a buddy of mine had just built a 4-acre pond, and you always hear, stock your bluegill, wait 6 months to a year, and then stock your bass, which is a good recipe. But I wanted to. There was me and a coworker of mine back when I was at Southland. We took two of these little. I think they were Titan bass, northern Titan bass. We took them. We put them in an aquarium, and we just dumped mosquito fish in there every day because we wanted to see how big they could get. And we got them up to about, I don't know, half a pound. And when we got them to half a pound, we took them and we put one in one bluegill production pond.
Oh
And
man.
the other one in another bluegill production pond. And we just wanted to see what would happen. And we kind of forgot about them.
Yeah.
And then 2 years later, we go and we seine these ponds.
Yeah.
Those things are in there.
Yeah.
They were both. Their heads were like this big, and their bodies. This was less than 2 years, and they were 6 pounds.
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of see if I could translate that to someone's, farm pond.
Sure.
And so me and a buddy, we stocked it. I think we did 1,000 bluegill to the acre, and we actually did. It was a 4-acre pond. We put 300 bass in there,
Okay. Yeah.
which I usually do more like 50 to the acre. But anyway,
Yeah.
but we let the bluegill go for 2 years and
Oh, wow.
just
Okay.
ran feeders, and it kind of created the same environment. I mean, the pond is still slap full with bluegill, but
Right.
when the first bass that he caught, he sent me a picture and he was like, I think these bass are like some kind of dwarf bass because they were, this long, but like
It's so big around. Yeah.
big
No, they're
around.
not.
It's like, no, man,
158% body weight.
been eaten. Uh, so, but that's one that I want to shot. This March will be exactly 2 years. Um, the last time one was weighed, it was over 5 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I think, back in October or so.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to get the shock boat in for there, and that should be pretty interesting. And he sent you a picture of these fish, I think, maybe 6 months into after we stocked.
Right.
And you had made a comment that you wanted to come check out the pond or something, but I guess I'm extending an invitation if you want to be there when we
yeah,
talk these things
absolutely.
up.
That'd be awesome. It'd be good content.
He's got another pond on the property that's unmanaged. It's actually got a lot of newfar or spatterdock. And it just, he kind of lets it run wild. And I think since there's still an overabundance of bluegill, it's kind of affecting catch rates. So we're gonna move a bunch of bluegill into the other pond. I think that's the plan, at least.
Yeah. That would be an interesting side by side. I'm unfortunately for me, I didn't have all this technology. Not that I'm very good with it anyway, but I had so many lakes that I could have gone, like, we've been doing this, and this for 15 years. Let's look at the differences. All that's gone now, unfortunately for me. But that just jumps out, where you have that unmanaged, especially covered with weeds, and then you can put a shock boat in and watch the density, density of the fish population and the numbers, the size of the biggest fish, and then go right up the road there and do it in something that's been managed and look at the differences. That would be great content right there.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, you're welcome to come. I'll just check with him. I think at the time he was excited about it, so I'm sure.
Yeah. I remember that. Those fish are looking great. Those are the Titans, weren't they?
They were there, and that was also the first pond. I've been with working with those guys at Red Hills that do the Titan bass.
Yeah.
Kind of at least since they've gotten their pedigree established. So I've known those guys. Josh, the head biologist, super smart dude. I've learned a lot from him too about genetics.
Oh, yeah.
That's way above my pay grade. That stuff is, but it's really interesting. But it starts scrambling my brain.
I know, man. I call that Dr. Evil's Bass Laboratory down there. That place is amazing.
Have you? Yeah, you've been there.
Yeah,
it's a pretty facility for sure. It's a little far for me, but whenever I have the chance, it's fun to go over there.
Yeah, I know, right? That's where I got the fish for Sugar Hill Outdoors Pond.
Yeah. I remember that.
Up down there. I had a mistake. I don't really know what it was. I think it might have been, I initially stocked that pond with F1s from Brian, and Clint was wanting to get it going, get it as fast as possible type situation. Yeah. And I was wanting to let him go a year, like you were talking about, just let the bluegill marinate for a year. And in doing that, I'm not sure what I did. It was the only time in my career it ever happened. I put the bass in, and they just did not take.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I also was doing working a regular job for a buddy of mine. I was a pool man, and I'm wondering if I had maybe some chlorine contamination or something like that, because that was the only, like I said, I've never ever put bass in as fry and lost them that way, but I certainly did, especially in front of God and everybody on TV. Lost them. But
So the
then,
bass died when you put them in?
well, yeah, I watched the little school of them swim off. You know,
Okay.
they were all fry. They were very young fry. Um,
Huh.
I don't know if I lost them to predation. I don't know if I lost them to contamination. I don't know how I lost them because they look
Yeah.
fine swimming off. Usually they temp shock immediately when they're that size and just die if you did it wrong, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so again, it's still kind of a mystery. I still kind of toss that around in my head. What did I miss? What did I not see? Where did I mess up? But at the same time, that allowed, it was actually kind of a blessing. Maybe God killed them for me. I don't know. Because then it allowed the pond to sit for not a year, but a little bit longer period to get a couple more bluegill spawns into it. And then it also allowed me to use the Titan bass.
Yeah.
And then, so we've got the Northerns and the Floridas in there on the same food chain, so to speak. And I've never been able to do that before. We got them pit tagged, so we can kind of differentiate them. Yeah. So yeah,
I'll say this: transporting fish is an art.
Oh
And
yeah,
as many fish as I've successfully stocked, it's tricky. And sometimes they stock fish out of planes. They just fall 100 feet into the water or whatever, but then you gently release them and they just turn
they
upside
just
down.
die. I know, right? I don't get it, but I'm not disappointed in the results that we've got. And it's been confirming some of the things that I've observed over the years about the differences, and I guess we can call them different species now. They're not the subspecies anymore; they're different species of bass. And it's been interesting to watch the Floridas, watch the Northern. The Floridas are not growing nearly as fast,
Yeah.
But I think what they lack in aggressiveness and overfeeding, they make up it in longevity. And I think that's probably why you see them get bigger.
Yeah.
They get caught less and they live longer.
Yeah. I think this isn't, who knows, this is just kind of my thoughts on it, but they have a long growing season. And I think, and this actually, talking with Josh, the head biologist at Red Hills, I think actually this comes from him. He was saying that maybe the longer growing season, those fish, take less risks. They're less aggressive, so they're taking a lot less risks. They're doing a lot more since they're genetically predisposed to a long growth season. They're kind of taking their time and just on along.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I never thought about it that way. But
whereas your Northerns are kind of live fast, die hard,
right,
just trying to grow as fast as they can because they're coming from places with real short growth seasons. But I think this is all just philosophy. I don't know if there's any facts involved here, but it's kind of philosophy.
Educated guesses is what I'd call it. Yeah. I got a couple of usual suspects on here. Mike, yes, Michael, that is. We are talking about Titan bass when he describes Red Hills. It's the same place. I don't know why they have two different names. Let me scroll back.
So Red Hills is the name of the fishery. It's kind of like with your tiger bass, like American Sportfish is the company, and then their bass are called tiger bass.
I got
It's
you.
the same concept. And then Red Hills also has their Titan Max, which is they just released it last year, and that's like their Florida with the trophy genetics confirmed by geneticists.
Right.
But I get a lot of calls from people wanting to stock these fish, and they're trying to stock them before they even have bluegill in the pond.
Oh yeah.
Or at the same time as bluegill. So before you even think about genetics, you need to make sure you got the right fish in the pond at the right rates, and when they hit the water, they can hit the water running and not just starve to death.
Yeah.
No genetics, or they have an established pond with a bunch of small bass, and they're saying, "I want to get the Titan bass because all my bass are small." I'm like, "But
Yep.
you make the problem a lot worse. You throw those things in there with
Yep.
what you got going on." So,
Yeah. That's unfortunately a real common thread that I've had to deal with for 30 years now. And that's part of the reason I do this. So guys like you coming up can not have that conversation anymore. Can we advance, please? That's all I ask. Let's just get some basic facts down.
mm-hmm.
So instead of spinning your wheels talking about this, stocking strategy that's obviously been in the book for 100 years, just follow that somewhat close. You're going to be all right, and then now we can then start addressing things like plankton density and the species of phytoplankton and get into stuff that's interesting to talk about and going to help the management of the fisheries instead of just spinning our tires in the mud talking about the same things over and over again.
Yeah.
So that's why I like doing this.
That's
I
why I
couldn't
like
find
you.
anybody. I couldn't find anybody doing it, so I had to do it myself.
That's why I like you doing it too. You kind of do a lot of the heavy lifting for me. I just
Yeah.
kind of refer people to you, let them, cycle through all your information, and it takes a lot off my plate.
Yeah, I'm glad it does. I'm so it makes me proud that it helps. I got a question coming in from Jay Rosa over on Instagram. He's wondering about the effort in Florida to stock trout and what kind of massive bass that's going to grow into the future. And yeah, I don't have any problems with that at all. They're stocking those just north of me here in Kingsley. And the problem with Kingsley is it's on a military base. But fortunately, from all the cool people that I've met on the internet, I think I've got an in to go over there and fish that lake. You can see it on a map. It's really easy to find it. It's perfectly round. It's in central Florida here. And it's the perfectly round lake that looks like a meteor hole. And I guess that's what it is. I don't even know the history of that lake, but it's deep. Like I can't remember the guy, 50 feet, 60 feet. Like most of these Florida lakes are like 6 feet, this thing is deep, deep.
Huh.
So that is one place that they're doing. And I'm going to be getting Jason Dotson, hopefully back on here. He's agreed to come on. I need to follow up with him. He's the biologist down here for the FWC. And he was the one telling me about that. And there's another lake somewhere else, I can't remember where, but they're doing some trout stockings and where they can get away with it. And I guess they figure they can get away with it in that big lake because it's so deep. Get them to hold over, getting some. I don't know if they'll hold over. I'm doubting very seriously they'll hold over, but you get at least a little bit longer a lifespan on them there. I've used rainbows around Atlanta a lot. Stock them in the wintertime. We'd put them in an Atlanta area around Thanksgiving, and they'd stay until the spring got warm. You'd have trout for a long time.
Yeah, I don't do a whole lot of trout stuff. I don't think there's any trout farms in South Carolina, but it's just so hot. That's when you're talking about stocking trout in Florida. I was like, that either deep lake or we do stock trout in certain places in South Carolina. Actually, there's a lake right outside of Columbia where they stock trout, or a river coming off a lake, but the river is fed from the bottom of the lake, so it's cold.
Yeah.
But you have to have those specific scenarios where you can even keep trout alive because they like cold water. They hit.
Oh yeah. I would just put them in my lakes, on my trophy bass lakes. About the time they're getting lethargic from the oxygen depletion for them, 68, 70 degrees, those bass are bedding, or either going right on or coming right off. So they get eaten up quickly. And the trout would get pretty big. You stock them 8, 9 inches and they'd be a couple of pounds if you've kept the feeder going all winter. So you were putting a lot of big protein right down the gullet of the biggest bass. For
Yeah.
anybody who hasn't been following along here, that's the ideology of that. I was not stocking trout to keep them alive in a pond in Georgia. I was stocking trout to feed them to largemouth bass. And that's pretty much what they're doing here too. I wouldn't anticipate them, once it gets hot in the summer, those trout they're gonna get so lethargic due to just no air. They're gonna get whacked by those big bass, and they'll have to restock them.
Which is a lot of credible pond managers use trout as their kind of winter supplemental forage program. Put trout, like you're saying, put trout in the winter, let them feed all winter long, and then as the water starts warming up, bass start feeding again about the same time that trout start getting nice and slow. So it's big bait going down the bass's mouth, which is a really good stocking strategy. And in South Carolina, we can use tilapia.
Oh, can you? Yeah.
So I do a lot more tilapia in the summer.
Are you having any good results with that?
Yeah, I have. They make a lot of babies.
Yeah. What rates are you stocking them at? I've done a little bit of that in North Carolina when I worked up there, but they've never been legal in Georgia, so I don't have that much experience. But my experience has kind of been, you put them in and watch the bass eat them all in 20 minutes, or you put them in a stormwater retention system or something like that, and they go in and they do exactly what you said. They go crazy, they reproduce, but then there's no bass in those systems, so there's nothing to control them. And then you just end up with a big mess when they die in the fall. You got to go pick up all the dead fish, and everybody has a panic attack and thinks there's chemical, problems and all that kind of
stuff. Yeah.
So, but again, my experience is extremely limited with them. So I'm just curious, like, what rates are you stocking and what sizes you stocking to get them to successfully reproduce?
Yeah, the bigger the better, just so it doesn't turn into a feeding frenzy when they hit the water.
Right.
Depending on the size of the pond, usually 300 to 500 fish to the acre. And you want them kind of as close to 5 inches or better as you can get, just so they can hit the water and start making babies before they get whacked.
Yeah.
But what if a couple of them make it, you're good, because they start pumping them out.
They're prolific as hell, aren't they?
When we would grow them in ponds, when you drain that pond at the end of the season, once the buzzards have eaten all the millions of dead tilapia, the pond looked like the face of the moon. I mean, every square inch of that pond has a bed on it. They get busy. So they're I've had some good success with them, and it's growing more and more. Another thing they do that's really good is the cyanobacteria blooms that you get in the summer. They filter that stuff out of the water.
Really?
Eat it. I mean, so they do a lot of water filtration too. And then, filamentous algae isn't the worst thing in the world, depending on what kind. A lot of times good, but when you're trying to fish and it's all gunked up with filamentous algae, that can be annoying. Putting those in, they'll wipe filamentous algae out. Duckweed, you stick them in a pond full of duckweed, it's gone.
Really?
Yeah, they love it, and they're quick. And you can spray duckweed, or unless you do like a full water treatment, there's going to be one little stack of duckweed left, and it's going to. But those tilapia are pretty good about nipping every last one of those little specks.
How about that? How about that? I did not know they would control duckweed. The duckweed is the devil itself. I've had a lot of battles with duckweed. Yeah, it can be. I have eradicated it with diquat before, but I'm talking about 10-day treatments, and going in and just, but very labor intensive, very expensive, and only more expensive when you go to the Floridone or Sonar or whatever they call it any of these days. But Yeah, duckweed is the absolute devil.
Yeah.
All right, so that's going to bring me, how long? We 40 minutes. Okay. I've got a email in today from Kyle from Facebook, and he says he's been managing a pond in central Wisconsin with a trophy bass goal. It's 2.25 acres. It's 23 years old, 8 foot, 11 foot. Sounds like it's got good depth, probably 7-8 feet of average depth. It is unfertilized, and runoff comes in. In the summertime, they've always had algae and leafy pondweed. In the past years, it's been controlled using Crystalplex algae control and a herbicide. He doesn't remember offhand. I'm probably going to guess it's dicot, but
Yeah.
If he's got usually the dicot's right next to the Crystalplex at the feed supply store. So that's where I'm getting that from. He's learned that maybe this isn't the best route for his aquatic invertebrates to grow, or his phytoplankton bloom really to grow healthy fish. And he's looking for a professional opinion on weed and algae control. And he's got a nice clump of what looks like pondweed there. Maybe some Cara mixed in with that too, and a nice blue pond. Well, I will advise not to use that blue stuff where you want fish production.
Right.
What's your advice on that, John?
When you say a blue pond, is it pond dye? Is that
yes, sir? It looks like Six Flags water.
Yeah, no. If you want a fishery, don't. If you're managing a pond for a fishery, don't use the blue stuff. It kills the bottom of the food chain. Unless you're doing, I know this is kind of your bread and butter, right? Because you manage fisheries and HOA ponds where they wanted that. So you're the expert on this, but killing the bottom of the food chain.
I have seen this one. Actually, I can name drop all over this if you'd like. Back in the day when I was a young rookie and going to school, my major professor, he did a little pond management on the side, and one of the side jobs he picked up was for Kenny Rogers. And back then in Comer, Georgia, Kenny had a big horse farm, 1,000 acres, 2,000 acres, something ridiculous amount of land, and a golf course, and all the water hazards were managed for trophy bass fishing. And Dr. Gilbert did all that for him. Well, somewhere along the line, a named television fisherman, I won't say his name, but decided to start a pond management business and managed to talk Kenny into firing the man who was the University of Georgia fisheries professor and hiring the jackleg off the TV. And they went from a managed, like each water hazard was, some of them were small, some of them were pretty big, but the water hazards were fertilized and managed for trophy bass. Like I said, by Dr. Gilbert, the guy who taught me everything I know about this stuff. And it went from that to adding pond dye, and that was and then after that, the guy didn't stay in business very long, obviously, because he didn't know how to grow fish. He knew how to catch them. He was a television fisherman, a very famous one, but he didn't know anything about growing them. And he lost the gig, and then he didn't have the business anymore. And then eventually Kenny Rogers sold the place. But then about the time that I was in college, that property became available back to us as students. Dr. Gilbert got with the new owner, and then we were able to go and electrofish. And with all that information, right, it used to be this way, and here's the data. We had all the data sets and all the electrofishing surveys for the years that Dr. Gilbert had it. And then there was like a 5, maybe 8-year period or something like that of complete mismanagement. And then we got to go back in and look at what happened. And what happened can be best described by like Auschwitz.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the skinniest, poorest,
Like hammers.
couldn't believe they were still alive fish.
Jeez.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
horrible.
Honda is pretty brutal. I don't even like, I guess that's just my opinion. I don't even like the look of it.
I don't either. And once you see what it does to your fish population, and for again, we got people who might be tuning in new here. So what's happening? And I'd made a post today about light penetration, and that's very important to understand because that sunlight is what drives the phytoplankton bloom, and the phytoplankton is the base of the food chain. So, as John touched on earlier, we were talking about adding threadfin shad to work down that phytoplankton bloom. All right. He has an excessive phytoplankton bloom that he added a direct filter feeder in to feed on to transfer that plankton directly to largemouth bass forage. Okay. That's a smart way to do that. All right. This guy, we boosted with fertilizer, we boosted that phytoplankton bloom to make the pond, instead of carrying like 100 pounds of fish per acre, it was carrying like 400 pounds of fish per acre. They put that dye on there, and now you've gone from 400 pounds of fish per acre now to a pond that probably carries like 70 pounds of fish per acre.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've shaded the plankton, which has reduced the light penetration, which kills the plankton, which reduces the food at the very base level. So that's where we're going with this. If you guys aren't keeping up, that's just to clarify. Let me go back to Instagram real quick and make sure we don't have any lingering questions. I got to toggle back and forth.
And going back to, I think, Wisconsin, was that where the guy was?
He's in Wisconsin.
I don't know much. When you get in different areas, the management strategies kind of change, and I don't want to claim to be any kind of expert on what to do in Wisconsin.
Right.
It seems like that's an 8-foot pond. It freezes over up there, doesn't it? So
yeah, he said he's got some holes that go down to 11 or 12.
Okay.
He's definitely got some depth there. And it sounds like he does have some plankton issues, but again, with all of the, let's see, I would expect that his plants are going to change the density of the plankton as well. And that's another way that can happen. The plants take the nutrients out of the water that the plankton needs. So when you start getting too many plants, it's thinning, doing the same thing to that phytoplankton bloom that the blue dye is doing.
Yeah.
Okay. So he wants to control the plants and keep his productivity going. So again, I can't speak on Wisconsin myself because I haven't done any work up there. But the first place I would check for controlling bottom vegetation is just, can you stock grass carp? Can you get a permit for some carp?
Yeah, especially the pondweed species. The
Yep.
grass carp love those pondweed species.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's gonna say, I'd say you stock maybe 25 in a 2.5 acre pond, maybe 30, something like that. You should get like 7 years of weed control out of those or so. And that would cut out all of the chemical applications that you have to spend money on for 7 years to control that plant. So you're not using chemicals in the water, which I think is good. Mm-hmm. And you're kind of saving money. You're going to spend some money up front for the carp, but then, you're going to get good weed control out of them for 6, 7, maybe even 8 years, sometimes 10. That being said, you'll also see a shift. Once you stock the grass carp, you'll see a shift away from the pondweeds and probably more towards filamentous algae problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's pretty common. You don't have the nutrients being taken up by the plants. You're going to have some more, you're going to get greener water. You're going to get a denser phytoplankton bloom. It's going to kind of a pea soup green color to the water. You're just looking at plankton there. And then you need to be prepared to do filamentous algae treatments. Now, we touched on that before just now. Maybe you can use tilapia up there. I'm not sure. Tilapia would be the same way. That's a fish that could eat the filamentous algae. But in the event you can't put them in there, you could use a chelated copper. I would recommend like a liquid copper that you can get at the farm supply store, and the directions will be on the label. Copper is toxic to fish. You have to be very careful with it. Don't over apply copper ever. It's always better to go with the low rates on the copper. There's also other products that are like peroxide-based algicides. You can get away from copper all the way around with like Green Clean Pro.
Yeah.
That's a great product that I've used before. If anybody out there watching Green Clean Pro wants to kick some cash this way, all right. But I'm just saying there's options out there for you treatment-wise, and you got guys in the world like John who can help you with that kind of stuff. I would recommend that you find a local biologist that is not guessing like John and I, and can say, this is how we do this here. This is how we do that here. Get somebody who has some, boots on the ground knowledge for central Wisconsin. But that's not to say that we can't consult with you and help you. I'm just saying, much like what we talked about, John covers South Carolina. I worked in Georgia primarily. Now, ours being that close together, our ponds we're going to have very similar experiences.
Yeah.
You start moving to different parts of the country with different water qualities, different runoff, all kinds of different. You're going to have a lot of different problems that we might not even be aware of, and that's the reason why I keep bringing in biologists from all over the place, because we can consult on this stuff. Yeah, we can talk about it, but still, every single pond is different too.
Yeah, the only thing I would say to him though is maybe stay away from that. Did you say Crystalplex?
It was a Crystalplex junk.
Don't do the copper sulfate, because
don't do the copper sulfate.
That's really, really bad to the bottom of the food chain. That stuff sticks around in the soil basically forever.
Yeah, decades.
If you have a Tractor Supply, I know they usually sell Q-Trine. That would be the copper product that's readily available to the public. Green Clean Pro, though, the peroxide, if you can get your hands on it, it's really nice because the byproducts of peroxide is oxygen. So you'll see it when you use it, it starts fizzing up. And all it's doing is increasing oxygen in the pond, and then it kind of goes away. I'm not a scientist. I don't know exactly how it breaks down, but that's a really good one for the algae. I like the Green Clean Pro.
I do too.
It's a little more expensive than your Q-Trine. So if budget is an issue, I'd get Q-Trine. Stay away from the blue crystal stuff. Copper sulfate is bad. I don't even know why they still sell it.
I don't either, and I don't like it. And you can't get guys to listen. But I've been doing this for 50 years. Yeah, I know. You've been poisoned in the environment for 50 years. I know. That's what I'm trying to prevent. But you can't. I don't think any of those products should be available to the public at all.
They tend to be misused
the most by the public. It's not you and I. It hits our bottom line. What am I over applying chemicals for? Because I hate money.
Yeah.
I know how to use them at the lowest possible rate to use them.
Yeah.
And you sell them to the public and just let people go wild, out of control, drunk on methamphetamine with them. And I just don't get it. That's always irritated me. So I always try to help people with that kind of information. Carmex is another one. I just had a comment about that crap the other day. My God almighty. It's not even legal to use in ponds anymore, but because it was used in the 40s or something, it's still hanging around. And it's the exact same thing John just said. It ties up in the detritus, and it doesn't go away, and it's a insecticide to your aquatic invertebrates, and it reduces the food that your fish have basically forever.
Yeah.
You don't want that stuff. And I just don't understand why guys can hear that statement that I just made and then blow back information. Oh, I've been doing it for a long time. Yeah. Your bass are 68% relative weight too.
Yeah. It's never killed my fish. And I'm like, that's not, you don't really see. You don't see the immediate, whatever. Like you don't see. It's not going to just like turn your fish up.
Right.
What you're doing is on a microscopic level a lot of times, and a lot of times it takes a while for you to see the effects.
Yeah.
So it's never killed my fish, and I've been putting it in for 25 years. It's like is the most ignorant statement ever, especially when hearing someone who's knowledgeable like yourself or other biologists talk about why it's bad. It's if it was good. I mean, if it was not bad for the pond, why would you not want to use? Like, there's a reason that they say don't use it in ponds, and it's not any kind of weird money thing or whatever.
I've gotten a lot of that. Oh, you're just putting that in to make money. And I'm like, you don't understand how this works at all, Chief. Like, this goes out for a bid. If you're spraying public water, I've worked on public crews. Yeah, that goes out to a bid, and it goes to the lowest common denominator. Basically, they just scroll down the page and they go, what's the bottom number? Okay, go do the job. And here's the allotted chemicals that you have that you bid, right? There's not adding more for more money. You don't go back and get another check. You better go do it on that, or you're going to be spraying your profit money down there to kill those fish, or to kill those plants. So, and if you kill the fish, that's on you too. That's the way the state gets away from like any kind of liability they have. They subcontract the treatments, and then it's on the private contractor's insurance if anything goes wrong.
Yeah.
And once you see how all this crap works, you could see everybody's talking points are irrelevant. But the problem is people don't never listen to how it works.
No.
Josh is a long time. He's got says he's got some smaller fish. They report dying in the winter. And is that normal? Yes or no on winter fish kills? Josh, that is normal. Much the same way oxygen goes away in the summertime. We've talked about plants can take up too much oxygen and then create have too much plankton, too many plants. Low oxygen levels at night will kill the fish because the warmer the water gets, the less oxygen that it holds, and the more plants you get, the more oxygen demand there is. So at some point, there's a loss to the fish. The same thing can happen in the winter when the ice is over. The sunlight that comes through the ice, and again, I'm really glad I made that light penetration post this morning. I'm coming back to it all the time. The light can penetrate through the ice and the plankton can still create the oxygen underneath the ice. It doesn't have to be exposed to the air. But where you get into problems is when that ice gets a big snowpack on top, cuts that light penetration out. That reduction in light penetration reduces the oxygen, and it'll kill the fish under the ice that way.
Yeah, and you see fish kills too, just kind of when the seasons change.
Oh, yeah.
It's pretty normal to see that.
Lake Life over on Instagram's got one. He's heard 10 pounds of forage fish to grow 1 pound of bass. Yeah, Lake Life, that is the book knowledge stuff there. And tilapia have a higher conversion rate. I don't know about that. I don't think that it matters too much what type of forage the bass are eating. I've like the rates that we've seen the bass grow at Sugar Hill and it's just bluegill only and some red ear. That's the only forage that we have. I have never stocked threadfin shad and bluegill and red ear or any other combination of forage fish and seen them grow faster because of some specific species of fish that was stocked. Where you get the growth is when you have the balance, like we talked about. We stock the forage, we let it go. If it was bluegill only, that's fine. I've done it bluegill only a lot of times. I've also done it with bluegill and shad and let it go for a year and let it fill up. Basically, at the end of the day, the carrying capacity on that pond, if it's 400 pounds of fish per acre, say, and you've got 2 acres, that's 800 pounds of forage. You're going to have 800 pounds of bluegill, or you're going to have 800 pounds or 400 pounds of bluegill and 400 pounds of threadfin. You're not going to stock threadfin and suddenly the 800-pound carrying capacity goes to 1,600 pounds. That's not how that works. That's how people think that it works, but that is not how it works. And I guess from my field experience, there are no combinations of forage fish that are going to increase the bass growth. Where the bass growth comes from is the stocking that, like, we stock 40 fish per acre at Sugar Hill to get more fish down each individual bass's gullet, right? If you stock 50 per acre, you're going to reduce the growth rate. If I drop it back to 35 per acre, my fish would have grown a little bit more because they had a little bit more forage available to them. But the balance of the fishery is the most important thing to understand about growing trophy bass. Like, you've got to have that balance right. Once you've got the balance right, I can grow them on just about any forage. I don't care if it's tilapia, rainbow trout, shad, threadfin shad, gizzard shad, bluegill. Put them all in there. I'll grow them, or not. I'll still grow them.
Yep.
Now, when you start supplemental feeding with like trout, that's starting to get, if you've got money, that's kind of pushing it in the direction of where you're going, of like, okay, we put these fish in, and that's above and beyond kind of the carrying capacity, right? Because we know they're temporarily stocked. We know we grew them up to 2 pounds, and then the bass got them and wiped them all out, and we know we're going to have to do that again. I would count that outside the carrying capacity. But at the same time, I can't just say, oh, you know what I'm going to do is just feed these bass trout every winter and not have other forage fish for them to eat in the spring and the summertime. That won't work either, right? No. You can't just feed them trout. You've got to have an established forage base.
All right. Yeah, I think, maybe just to touch on it just quickly, some fish might have different fat and protein contents, just like some of the food that we eat has different nutritional values. So maybe he's saying that tilapia's protein and fat content is higher than other types of forage, so it's more efficient. I don't know.
Maybe so. I've never seen a study about that. You know what I mean? That sounds like something that a fish salesman would say.
Yeah, the tilapia in the summertime is mainly just to take pressure off bluegills and keep the food chain, make sure there's enough availability for the bass. I don't know if it has some higher protein content or anything like that. Makes them grow faster. I've never heard that.
No. I think that's where guys get in the most trouble. And what they try to mimic, I think, what they're seeing with lake managers and public water, and they'll go talk to those guys. They kind of try to bleed that over into pond management, not being unaware that it's really not even the same sport.
No, it's really not.
Completely different. Again, to understand, and that's why I like teaching the pond management, because I guess, for lack of a better term, you got to crawl before you walk.
Yeah.
If you don't understand fisheries management with 2 or 3 species of fish, how are you going to understand it with 36 species of fish?
Right.
You know what I mean? And every single one of them making it more complex. And I get a lot of that. Like, well, I'm talking about managing lakes. I'm like, I don't care what you're talking about. You're talking about it wrong. Like, we are talking about pond management right now. You are talking about Lake Michigan.
Yeah.
That's not the same thing. And it's just, I don't know. We just live in this land of denial.
It's about as different as managing a pond or an aquarium.
Sure. Are there similarities? Sure, there are. Absolutely, there are. But there's enough differences to make it completely.
I did see. If you have a question for a guy, you can go ahead. But
go ahead. What do you got?
I saw you posted something, and I agree with most of it. It was like,
what don't you agree with?
It was red breast and green sunfish.
Yeah.
And you said if you see either one of these species in a pond, you basically nuke it or start over.
Yeah.
What's at Southland, red breast is on the menu. Green sunfish, I totally agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
Those things are pesky, but the red breast, I wanted to get your thoughts on it. Have you seen red breast negatively affect bass growth?
Mm-hmm.
What's the deal there?
Well, the times that I've seen it, I think again, it's a very unique situation, kind of like we touched on earlier. Have I seen ponds with red breast or small lakes with red breast that produce huge bass? Absolutely. Am I in a dead panic attack about a red breast? Not really. No. I can manage around some red breast. Usually, though, red breast being a stream fish, it's an indicator species for me. So when I see a red breast, I know there's a stream influence, which means there's going to be crappie influence. There's going to be green sunfish influence. There's going to be probably every other kind of fish influence as well.
Mm-hmm.
So on the very limited number of ponds I just had red breast as competing fish. Were they like green sunfish? No.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I have seen them where, say you've got I think these ponds were probably not stocked properly, but where maybe like 30-40% of the sunfish population or the forage population is in red breast. So you've got a third of what could be bluegill, right? But
Yeah.
they're not bluegill, and they only spawn once a year.
Yeah.
So a third of that forage base that if they were bluegill would be cranking out reproduction for me is just taking up space and not reproducing the way that it could be. So it's kind of like a throttle limiter, but they didn't really displace the bass population the way green sunfish do. I've never really seen that. But I have seen them where a few times where I was like, I really don't wish there weren't any red breast in here. They're just obnoxious at this point. But again, 3 times in 30 years. You know what I mean? Again, we've got to cherry pick this information, right? But yeah, I probably wasn't clear on that. But when I see a red breast, I just know there's a stream influence.
Yeah.
And then that's just the red flag goes up for me for everything in the world could be in here.
Yeah. You know? Yeah. I think Southland was, as far as I know, I've never seen another hatchery raise them.
Mm-hmm.
So like you're saying, if you see them in a pond, unless they're stocked by Southland, it's probably stream influenced, and there's pickerel and all kinds of weird stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I know Brian actually sells them, but they're like golden ones. Have you seen those?
Oh, I've stocked them.
Oh, yeah. I've never stocked them. They look cool.
Dude, you stock those golden red breasts and get your chartreuse spinnerbait ready.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, man. For about 3 months after you put those things in, the yellow is money out there.
It seems like it'd be awesome, like catfish bait or something, or just bass bait. But yeah, I've never noticed any negative effects with the red breast stocking. We always stock them in real low numbers, like 200 to the acre.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of a novelty thing. Like
that doesn't hurt my feelings. Doesn't hurt my feelings at all. I don't think you're ruining the world with that.
I did want to, if you knew something I didn't, I wanted to know, but
no, like I said, I just use it as a negative indicator. Just like if I saw, like you said, I'll pull your words, a chain pickerel or grass pickerel out of there. I automatically know, all right, whereas we've got we're going to be dealing with an outside source of competitors. And that's most places these days. Linda's got one here. Here's a hybrid bluegill, a subspecies of green sunfish. Linda, a hybrid bluegill is a cross between a green sunfish and a bluegill. And I don't like stocking hybrid bluegill unless we're in a very unique situation. Again, like we can get a very specific situation that I would use them. And that would be you're willing to drain and restock the pond at any time, and you want a trophy bluegill fishery. And at that point, hybrids would become an option. Do they get bigger than a bluegill on feed? I think that's subject for debate. I'm not so sure that they get that much bigger than just your standard bluegill. They get big. I'm not going to take away from them. If you do it right and manage them properly, you can grow a nice, hybrid bluegill to a trophy. But where the problems I see is when people are wanting them in a bass population and wanting to have a bass fishery that they're not really willing to drain the pond for. Because when those hybrids, even though they're not true hybrid in that they can still breed, and the dominant gene is green sunfish. So when two hybrid bluegill spawn, you get green sunfish born directly into your pond. And that brings us back to where we were just talking about. We don't like seeing crappie and green sunfish and things like that competing with our bass. And that's kind of a slick way, backdoor way, a way you don't really realize you're introducing those green sunfish into your pond. With the stocking of those hybrid bluegill.
Yeah, we used to sell them just because when the Georgia Giant came out, a lot of people wanted them, and so we're just trying to fill a demand. But we ended up taking them off the menu and just eradicating every green sunfish from the farm. The initial fish is awesome. It's a pretty fish. It grows really fast. I don't think it gets bigger than the normal or the copper-nosed bluegill either. But nice fish. But then after that, it goes downhill quick. When it starts reproducing, those babies are not worth anything.
Josh got another question coming through. Can a stream influence places be good? Absolutely, Josh. I mean, I can think of lots and lots of places that have a stream influence, and most of them do, especially where we are. Most of the ponds in the Southeast were built for erosion control and built right on streams for the purpose of capturing that erosion. So there's no way to manage a pond. You really have to. I have had some where there is no feeder stream and they're just fed off the watershed, and those are the best. But most of the time, most of my experience has been dealing with ponds fed by streams, which means outside sources of competition. There's so many of them, in fact, that you just can't even show somebody what it could be without the stream because it's so hard to find a pond. Even Sugar Hill Outdoors, we've managed to keep everything but some channel catfish from coming down from the pond upstream. We've had a few channels come in. And I'm not complaining about them. That's the worst case. That's the worst thing I'm going to get in there is some channel cats. I'm perfectly happy. But those streams bring you unwanted fishes. Those unwanted fishes bring you competition you don't want and reduce your bass. And you'll see it right on the relative weights. Once you start tracking those relative weights and writing those numbers down, you'll see it in the math. You'll see it in the numbers or on your data set, however you want to call it. It'll be like, oh, our bass are growing. We have nice over 100, and then it starts to drop. You'll see it right in the numbers, and you won't even. I mean, like my friend Philip on here. I've posted his comments a couple of times. Philip Cheek, he's gotten as good with me as I am with looking at the relative weight, and he goes to a pond and catches a bass, and it's like 83% relative weight. He goes, I bet there's crappie in here. He's gotten real good at it. I'm so proud of Philip. He's worked real hard in learning all that stuff. Yeah, but sure, absolutely, you can have really good lakes that are stream fed. You can also that stream can also be the downfall of that place. So you got to take the good with the bad.
Yeah. It can be hard to manage the balance too, especially in the early stages of stocking a pond if it's stream fed and you're trying to get the balance right in the beginning.
Yeah, there's Philip right there bringing in a good point. You can have bowfin come in on you, How about a little dinosaur bass to disrupt the balance? Yeah, that's absolutely right, Philip. You can have that. All right, so that's so those are jokes. I'm gonna go back to Instagram real quick. Atwater Fishing is asking about a quarter to a half acre pond, unrealistic to grow bass. Yeah, it is actually. I usually try to keep it an acre above. It's not that you can't grow some big fish in a real small pond. They certainly do. You'll see them, but they'll dominate it, and you'll just have one or two in something so small. And having one or two fish they get one. They're really in tune with their environment. If you're fishing small ponds and not having much success, you might want to go to like seriously like treat it like hunting. Go full camo, limit like use bushes and trees to hide. A big fish can see you come down to that pond. Like we had Alex Rudd came out with us this year, did a little extra fishing with Garrett and I on Client's Pond in Georgia, and it's again probably about an acre pond, and they did not catch any of these bass that we electrofished up out of there, and we had I think it was almost a 30-pound limit on 5 fish. And nobody ever saw those 5 fish in a 1 acre pond. And people fish there all the time, and no one ever caught one. He was trying to grow trophy bluegill, so we harvested those bass out. And if anybody saw the cooler full of nice big fish that we had dead and everybody had a panic attack on the internet, that's why we had a trophy bass and a trophy bluegill pond. So they became fried fish, tacos, and hush puppies.
So you're saying in smaller ponds, it's harder to the bass will pick up on you easier than larger ponds? I've never heard that.
Yeah, I've just noticed it. Just that again, I don't have any science for that. I'm just going off of years of doing it.
Yeah.
But I would go do electrofishing jobs, and I started to notice things like the ponds that were surrounded by trees. Right, you'll start seeing patterns. There's no wind and wave action on them, so there's no fragmented to the water whatsoever. So they can just look right out and see you, right? Huh. Those ponds that lack wind and wave action, going back to our prior conversation, you can guarantee those will be the less than 5 acres surrounded by trees. You're inviting the duckweed problem.
Oh yeah, yeah. Definitely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's those kinds of ideas where you walk up, the guy calls me and he says, I got a duckweed problem. I'm already envisioning a 3 acre pond in the woods. I don't even have to see it. I know. Right.
Yeah.
So same thing applies there. It's like the electrofishing survey looks good, but the guys are not, and the guys are skilled anglers too. We're not talking about, you know what I mean? And they're just not catching any fish at all. Like I said, go in there and try it. Go in there at night, go in there with live bait, go in there at, dark, and treat it like deer hunting and watch how it changes they can see you, they're not stupid. 5, 6, 8 pound bass laying around in a 1 acre pond. Yeah. That's a hard fish to catch.
Huh.
Let's see. We've got how bad are warmouth. I kind of categorize a warmouth kind of the way John and I were talking about those red breasts. Are you getting some competition out of them? Yes. Actually, probably not even that bad, because I have not seen a pond where I said, wow, I wish I just didn't have any of these warmouth in here. Where I have seen a couple ponds where I was kind of like, I kind of wish there wasn't this many red breast in here. I've never, again, it's usually a feeder stream or came in from a flood or whatever. You got a few in there. They usually look pretty healthy. They're usually not really messing anything up. In a perfect world, would I wish them out? Yeah, probably. But am I going to go and just have a panic attack about them? Not really. No.
I never see them in high numbers. It's always real low numbers. I don't know. So a lot of people look for them. I've never known anybody to grow them and stock them, but they're always in low numbers. Your green sunfish are really aggressive, and
Mm-hmm.
they make quite a few babies too.
Oh
So
yeah.
they're real pesky. Whereas
I
your
think
warmouth is different. They're not as aggressive and not the numbers you see from the green sunfish.
Do you think the green sunfish kind of spawn like the crappie too? I haven't. I'm not.
Irregularly,
Well, maybe before the bass, so you get it. You
they
got a
got the
competing fry kind of in there in front of your bass. I kind of always felt like they were that way, but I don't really know if that's a fact. I know the crappie do it because they're so far in front of the bass, but I kind of feel like the green sunfish are that way too. I've seen green sunfish wipe out ponds, like waste them.
Yeah, they're pretty aggressive little fish.
Mhm.
I don't know, but I guess in a bass management scenario, that wouldn't be the worst thing if they're spawning up before the bass and just eating up all your bass. That's just a lot less culling you have to do. But they just do too much competing with your bluegill and your bass, which is like the crappie. It's just that mouth. Everything's controlled with the size of your mouth and that pond, and that's just another fish with a big mouth that's just gonna take a lot of resources from your bass and bluegill.
Mm-hmm. Josh has got a question about a 51 acre pond. Actually, at 51, I'd probably call that a lake, Josh. That's getting on the lake side of things. To improve a better bass fishery. Well, again, I could do some general stuff, but I would much rather have some information, like what's the average relative weight? How many fish did you catch and measure? I'd on 50 acres, man, I'd like to see 100 fish or so weighed and measured. Um, and then a species list, what different species are you catching? And then with that information, I can give you a lot more uh, information than just kind of random stuff, just the basic stuff that we've covered here before. Things can be even, where is it located? How deep is it? It goes on and on and on and on. But that being said, I can say 51 acres, that's getting to the point where I have seen some just lakes that were left alone. They were just not managed per se, just, again, fed by streams or rivers, like big flows of water coming in. You would think that it'd have everything going against them, but no, they got tanks in there. They got real big bass in there. 50 to 100 to 150 acres. That's where you really get to the good size water where you can have, if it can produce big bass, those are the types of places that you really will start throwing off multiple big fish at that size water. So I'd pay attention to those lakes. Definitely. You can also, they're probably lack fishing pressure too, a lot of times. I'm just going to check Instagram. I didn't miss anybody over there. And we ran over an hour, but that's okay. I like to keep it. I've noticed like an hour to an hour and a half gets a little bit better on the viewer time. So if anybody has any questions, throw them up there real quick and we'll finish this up. John, you got anything else you want to add? Tell us about your business, where you're located, put all your phone numbers and things out there.
Yeah, just bullfrog pond management if you're in South Carolina. And I don't do a whole lot of social media stuff, but I am on Facebook, and that kind of acts as my website at the moment. You'll find all my contact information there, or just a Google search. But if you're in the South Carolina area, or if you're somewhere else and ever have questions and Shan's not available, I'm happy to talk with you on the phone. I do a lot of just phone consultations. Just try and help people how I can that way. But if you're in South Carolina area, you got a pond you want me to check out, or a pond you're trying to build, or issues with the pond you have, just give me a call. Happy to help you.
Awesome. I'm going to scroll one more time. And certainly thank you for coming on and talking with us, John.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime, my friend. And anybody who comes on here, I'll be sure to throw your way.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, man. Anytime. I don't see anything else, so I'm just going to wrap it up, guys. I really appreciate you again. Thanks for tuning in, and I will be back with another biologist. There's Garrett. There's another biologist right there that we've had on. Garrett, he's out in Texas.
Man.
Yeah, man. And we've got John in South Carolina. And the next person up on our OG interview is Derry Stockbridge out of Atlanta. He's been managing fisheries as long as I've been on this planet. So I'm looking forward to talking with Derry and getting some of his experience with managing ponds in the Atlanta area. Some of the same places that I managed, but before catch and release got so popular. And we can talk about the differences between these ponds back in the day and now. But like I said, boys, I appreciate you. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you in about a week.
Thanks, man.